along our border states. The question, quite simply, is how much longer till it boils in your state. Joining us now, Republican State Representative Steven Sandstrom from Utah, who is drafting a bill for his state modeled after Arizona's immigration crackdown, and representing the opposing viewpoint, Democratic Congressman Anthony Weiner of New York. Anthony, I also understand you're getting married. Congratulations on that, unrelated to everything. Talk to me, if you could, about why the federal government hasn't stepped in to interfere here, Congressman, and has basically allowed the states to get as far down this road as they have, and the implicit threat from the states is they're going to get more of it.
Well, I think it's inevitable that the Justice Department is eventually going to have to step in and say we can't leave each individual state to occupy what should rightly be a federal role, and obviously some court, whether it's in that state or whether it's a federal court, is going to strike down the idea that we can be asked to present papers in the year 2010 in the United States of America. It's obviously a violation of the Constitution, and even if you're here completely legally and documented fully to the teeth, the idea that we can be stopped on the street and asked for documentation is akin to Nazi Germany, not akin to any state in this country in 2010.
Representative Sandstrom, you think that the law you're proposing makes your state more like Nazi Germany?
You know, it's sad that people are trying to compare law and enforcing the law to Nazi Germany. I think it's a disgrace to look at the extermination of millions of people and compare it to simply asking to document that you're in the country legally. It is illegal to be in the United States illegally, and that's all we're looking at right now.
At the end of the day, again, the strongest argument, Anthony, is the federal government's not dealing with this, so we will. The border states are frustrated, fed up. You know the list. How much longer can the federal government and politicians avoid a debate which is so layered and has so much both hypocrisy and contradiction in it, it's almost politically unwinnable?
Well, I don't know about that. I think the solution is there for reasonable people in the middle. The problem is that the Republican Party is wallowing in this mosh pit of demagoguery right now, that not a single member of the United States Senate who has an R next to his name is even willing to talk about comprehensive reform. It is regrettable, and I think that we in the Democratic Party are going to have to do what we have to do a lot recently, be the only governing party here in Washington. We're going to try to address it. But the idea that asking people for papers is somehow an American ideal is wrong for Utah. It's wrong for the people of Arizona. We don't do that in this country because at least some of us believe in the idea of limited role of government. No one can call themselves conservative and advocate for a bill like my good friend is advocating here. You obviously believe in a very big, heavy-handed government asking people for papers. That is like Nazi Germany.
Representative Sandstrom, your response to that?
You know, the thing about that we fail to realize that right now, if you are a legal immigrant in this country and you have your green card, you are required by federal law to have that green card on you at all times. We're asked to show ID all the time. You're asked to show ID to buy alcohol in certain states. You're asked to see ID when you're pulled over for a traffic stop. You're asked to see ID when you go to the bank to cash a check. Simply to require showing identification, if there is probable cause, has nothing to do with Nazi Germany. It has everything to do with the rule of law, and I don't see a problem with it. And in fact,
let's stop there, because forget whether you see it or I see it. The problem that is being pointed out is that use of the word probable cause is being perceived as a green light for law enforcement, in this case in Arizona, were it to exist in Utah or New York or anywhere else, for law enforcement to physically harass minorities on the basis that they could be illegal, because the vast majority of the illegals are perceived to be non-white, non-Americans.
Well, Dylan, and let me add one thing to that. It doesn't have to be someone who looks Hispanic. All this law says is someone has reasonable cause to believe they might be an undocumented person. How do you draw that conclusion? Does that include Asians? Does that include me because I look like I might have come from someplace else? That's the problem with this. And this is the problem, is that we have this state is doing something very dangerous. They're putting law enforcement in a position that broad swaths of the population are going to avoid them at all costs. If you're a completely legal person, you're completely documented, you'll still want everyone cooperating with the police. You're setting up a tension the likes of which that are going to make states like Utah and states like Arizona untenable for their citizens, and that's regrettable.
I guess the flip side is, and I recognize you pointing the finger at the failure of the opposition party, Anthony, do the states have a point in that they feel they are bearing an undue portion of the burden of the social disruption and economic reality of illegal immigration in their states because they, by no choice of their own, are a border state. And they have a point that the federal government is quite simply not fulfilling its obligations. And so whether you like these measures or not, they're saying, you don't do it, this is what we are going to do.
Listen, I understand, and I'm a member of the Immigration Subcommittee. I want us to move this, and we're going to have to do it without any Republican support. But the same exact people who are making that claim are the ones who are saying we're not going to help pass a federal law. I'm from a border state. My state has probably more undocumented people come into it in a week than Utah has in a year. I get it. I understand the challenge. But we also have to realize something else. It is ultimately good for our economy and good for our country to solve this problem. We are not going to solve it by building a 100-foot fence along the Canada-Mexican border and patrolling it with tens of thousands of members of the military. We're going to solve this here in Washington, not in the capital of Utah, not in the capital of Arizona, and we're only going to do it if Republicans accept responsibility for governing.
Representative Sandstrom, do you look at this law as a mechanism to provoke Congressman Weiner and the Republicans in the federal government to deal with this, or do you look at this as an actual solution to your problem?
Well, I see it as
in
both.
Real life.
Number one, we need to have something happen at the federal level, but it needs to be securing the border. And so far, the federal government has been absolutely unwilling to close the border down. And the people in my state are demanding that I take action, that the legislature of the state of Utah take action to solve the problem. Now, one thing I might add, I do not believe that President Obama or the Democrats back in Washington, D.C. have actually read the Arizona bill. It specifically prohibits racial profiling. It only allows the question after you have probable cause. Now, what would probable cause be? If you're pulled over and you have a valid driver's license, if you have a valid resident alien card, then you have no problems. You can't just be stopped for no reason whatsoever. And at that point, if you cannot speak the language and you don't have any documentation, then there is probable cause you may be here illegally. It just gives another tool for law enforcement, another mechanism in which we can enforce existing federal law that already prohibits people from being here illegally in our country.
Listen, a pleasure to have the conversation with both of you. I really appreciate you both making the time. This strikes me as yet another gigantic, massive, huge, hot potato that nobody would really want to deal with, but we have no choice. So why don't we have, I don't know, baked potatoes or something. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Still ahead.
And thank you for having me on.
Thank you.